Testimony will pick back up on Monday in the reckless homicide trial in Door County. Anthony Gonzalez accused of accidentally starting a fire that killed 2 people in 2022.
The defense spent the morning raising questions about the building being up to fire code before the fire happened 2 years ago. The prosecution quick to push back. Gonzalez is facing 7 charges, including 2 counts of second-degree reckless homicide. If convicted, he could spend the rest of his life in prison.
Brittany Schmidt brings us today's testimony in this First Alert update.
Documents that my office.
Friday's shortened testimony focused on the multi-use building in downtown Sturgeon Bay where this deadly fire occurred in February of 2022. Anthony Gonzalez told investigators he accidentally started the fire in his room on the 2nd floor when trying to refill a lighter. 2 people died in the fire. The defense argues the owner of the building didn't comply with state and city standards to safely house people in the upstairs. A fire engineer hired by the defense testified to that opinion Friday in court.
The rooming house on the 2nd floor above Butch's Bar did not comply with the applicable codes adopted by the city of Sturgeon Bay and the state of Wisconsin. Specifically, it lacked a fire alarm system and it lacked self-closing doors on rooms that would have contained the fire and smoke from that fire.
The prosecution quick to challenge it.
Do you have information that this building at the time of the fire was not up to code?
Yes, as I've testified to.
Do you have information from the city?
No.
That the city found it not to be up to code?
No.
So the building inspector, Brett Temme, did not conclude that this wasn't up to code, correct?
Oh yeah, there were parts of his report that indicated that it was not in compliance with the code.
There were no pending code violations, were there, that you're aware of?
No, but Mr. Temme has
Okay,
never inspected it.
Your answer was no, there were no code violations pending with the city.
Correct.
The defense will call its next witness to the stand on Monday. In Door County, Brittany Schmidt, Action 2 News.